She was chief executive at Alameda and testified that Bankman-Fried directed her to falsify documents.
It's, I think, unusual at these kinds of trials, but Bankman-Fried took the stand. What did he have to say?
It is indeed unusual. Bankman-Fried testified for 3 days and laid blame on Ellison and other subordinates. He said he failed to pay close attention to what was happening at his company. Now, this is an argument he's made publicly as well, and his attorneys say he will continue to fight the charges. And in the meantime, there's a sentencing hearing coming up, David, that's scheduled for March 28th.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at schwab.com. And by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
It has been 4 months since the U.S. Supreme Court blocked President Biden's plan to write off up to $20,000 in student debt for most people with federal loans. Now the administration has come out with a new, very different student debt relief plan if it makes it from concept into rule. Here's Marketplace's Samantha Fields.
This new forgiveness plan would not apply to everyone with federal student loans.
The Department of Education is basically focusing on providing relief to 5 broad categories of borrowers.
Adam Minsky is a lawyer who works with student loan borrowers. He says those categories include
borrowers who owe a lot more now than what they originally borrowed, perhaps due to interest accrual and fees over time.
Borrowers who have been paying on their student loans for more than 25 years.
People who attended certain institutions that basically saddled them with unreasonable amounts of debt and didn't provide them with a clear pathway to generating income through employment.
People who should qualify for existing student loan forgiveness programs be as possible.
It's the White House trying to take another bite at the apple from a different angle where they might have surer footing from a legal perspective.
Betsy Mayotte at the nonprofit Institute of Student Loan Advisors says it will likely be about a year, maybe a little less or a little more, before anything is finalized.
This is not a done deal, and the proposals could change significantly before it is a done deal.
And she says any final rule could be challenged in court. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
And I'm David Brancaccio. This is the Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.
At VyStar Credit Union, we believe in helping members reach their financial goals and building stronger communities. It's why we offer our members better rates and give back to the places we call home. VyStar Credit Union. Visit vystarcu.org/join. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
It's the biggest stories of the week. The Department of Justice says it is monitoring the case of Lakean Woods in the wake of his controversial arrest. A federal judge rejects the high-profile settlement between Ameris Bank and the U.S. Department of Justice. The head of the local teachers union abruptly retires a month after the FBI and IRS raided the union headquarters. And a local Airbnb entrepreneur is accused of exploiting investors. Then, what local girls rugby team, the Duval Tides, has in store for the upcoming season. I'm Ann Schindler, and just ahead this hour, our Journalist Roundtable examines the week's top stories with our First Coast Connect Week in Review. It's all ahead.
It's 1 minute after 9 o'clock. This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. The endangered Florida panther is our official state animal and is one of the most endangered mammals in the country. Chris Young reports on a surprising statistic that may be indicative of the panther's decline.
Only 8 Florida panther deaths have been recorded this year, according to Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission record. They've all been from vehicle collisions. And for Elise Bennett, Florida and Caribbean Director and Senior Attorney for the Center for Biological Diversity, that's troubling.
The reason that seeing this lower number is a concern to us is because it suggests perhaps that the panther population is smaller, and so fewer panthers are being hit because there are simply fewer to be crossing roads.
What may be causing this decrease? There are many possible reasons, including habitat loss from development, as well as a fairly new disease.
It's called feline leukomyelopathy, or FLM. And officials have seen this both in bobcats as well as in Florida panthers. It's this neuromuscular disease that really inhibits permanently panthers' ability to move. So often these panthers appear to be wobbly, they stumble when they walk. And to date, we really don't know a whole lot about FLM.
Bennett is calling on federal officials to do more for the panther.
We've really urged the wildlife agencies to do a more in-depth assessment of what the panther population looks like right now.
She encourages the public to report wildcats that may have a wobbly walk to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and write their representatives to do more to protect the panthers. I'm Chris Young.
It's now 56 degrees in Jacksonville. 50% chance of afternoon showers today, partly sunny and breezy with high temperatures in the low 70s, down to 60 tonight.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and you're listening to First Coast Connect. It's Friday, so that means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. I'm going to be talking to 4 of my favorite local journalists about some of the big headlines of the week. Among our topics, the Department of Justice now monitoring the case of a man whose police takedown and bruised mugshot sparked national outrage. Also, a high-profile settlement in a redlining case is rejected by a Jacksonville judge. And investors accuse a local Airbnb entrepreneur of fraud. And later, the Duval Tides is here to chat about their upcoming season. It's a full show today, so let's get to it. Joining me today, attorney, investigative reporter, and political reporter for the Daily Dot, Claire Goforth. Welcome, Claire.
Good morning.
Hetal, former BBC journalist and producer at 2 local news stations. Hetal, you're back at the mic.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
Great to have you here. Jasmine Monroe, weekend anchor and reporter at First Coast News.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on for your very first time. And Nicole Mana, an investigative reporter with the nonprofit investigative news outlet, The Tributary. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
Great. You can listen live on the radio, or you can watch our video stream right now on Facebook and the WJCT YouTube page. And you don't just have to quietly observe. We invite you to be a part of the conversation today. Call us at 549-2937. Tag us on X at FCC On Air, or send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also message us on the First Coast Connect and Facebook, Instagram pages. Well, let's start. First, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice is, quote, monitoring the JSO arrest of Lakean Woods on September 29th. That's the word that was used in an October 23rd letter from the DOJ to an attorney who's representing Woods' family. This comes after intense scrutiny of the arrest, which a bystander recorded and which a subsequent mugshot showed resulted in extensive injuries to Woods' face. Let's start with you, Claire. A little of your legal background as well. Is this the kind of case that the DOJ would take an interest in?
I mean, they clearly are. So yes, in short answer. Typically, though, in DOJ, they are not as aggressive as many people would like. Having seen the footage of the arrest, which is very harrowing to watch, and read about the injuries, which included internal and external injuries. And mind you, this is for someone that the officers said they saw, do a drug deal. The outsized, in many people's views, response to such an alleged crime. I mean, they essentially treated this man as though he was 100% guilty and deserved whatever, whatever punishment that they decided to mete out. I mean, there were multiple officers on him, and he went to the hospital. It was, they had to put a warning on the photo when they showed it on the news because of how swollen his face was. And there's this perception in Jacksonville that, and many other cities, to be fair, that there are certain members of police who feel as though they can beat people with impunity. And that is what many people feel happened in this case. And one of the things that a lot of people pointed to is just how swiftly the sheriff vindicated all of the officers who are now all back on duty, is my understanding. It was a matter of, a day or two, and he said, no, it's fine. None of them did anything wrong. And, when you see someone get beaten like that over a relatively minor alleged crime, and then the officers are just completely, they go off scot-free, it really fuels the perception that police can do whatever they want.
Jasmine, the Woods family attorney released their letter to the DOJ and the DOJ's response. They asked for an investigation, but the Department of Justice didn't go quite that far in their response, did they?
No. So pretty much, what folks are saying basically online, it's both sides. They're trying to explain exactly what happened and why it happened. You're looking at the newscast, even speaking on other police brutality stories. I've worked in Cleveland. I've covered these. You have to cover all of your bases. You have to look at both sides of the fence. Myself personally, I have family who are in the police force too as well. Just how that looks, how that sets the precedent for police officers, how they should be reacting. Either way you look at it on, whatever side of the fence you want to look at it on, it's something that they have to, the family also has to think about too as well.
So JSO was very clear in their response when this news came out that the DOJ was quote unquote monitoring the case. They said any characterization that the Department of Justice is actively monitoring the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is categorically and unequivocally false. And they continued, the JSO is not being monitored, investigated, or examined by the Department of Justice. As our agency has previously articulated, we welcome the inquiry regarding JSO's officers' conduct during the arrest of Mr. Woods, and we're confident that federal investigators will arrive at our same conclusion, that the officers involved acted within policy. Nicole, I'm reading two things there when I'm reading it. They're saying they're not being investigated, and then they say they welcome the DOJ inquiry regarding officers' conduct in the arrest of Mr. Woods. What's happening there?
Well, the department as a whole, it doesn't seem like it is being investigated or monitored, but the DOJ was very clear that they are monitoring the actual arrest. So I think that's what's happening there. I think it's semantics, and I think it's bad wording in the statement. Nobody has reported or said that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is being investigated or monitored, just this incident.
And so did that letter from DOJ surprise you that they are taking an interest on some level in this case, or is that just a placeholder for the DOJ to say, we received your letter asking for an investigation and we're aware?
It's hard to say exactly. The DOJ also was asked to investigate the jail very recently with deaths being tripled there since Armor had taken over the healthcare. And the DOJ said they, responded to that request and said, we got your request and we're forwarding it up. That doesn't mean that there's an investigation, but we received it. So it's kind of two different responses there, where we see the DOJ in this case saying we are monitoring this incident, but then we see the DOJ in the jail saying, we're not saying we're investigating, and we're not saying we're not investigating. So it is interesting to see those two responses.
Yeah, a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
Hetal, in order for an arrest to constitute a civil rights violation, investigators must find that law enforcement engaged in a pattern or practice of denying people their constitutional rights. Is it possible that if a pattern or practice is the standard, that a single case like this one just wouldn't rise to the level of something that DOJ would investigate?
Well, I think that's why it's so important that this is on their radar, because what the DOJ has said since Ferguson and since they kind of launched this whole movement with the DOJ, with the Civil Rights Division, is that we want to make it a priority that we are working with police departments, not just to discipline, but actually put in place oversight and policies and reforms that are going to help those sheriff's office and police officers do better if there are systematic problems. And they're the first ones under Vanita Gupta that were looking at this and doing studies on what are the trends and what are the problems and what kind of reforms do we need in place. We know that if we don't have trust in our local police, it's a huge problem for the entire community. So I think what people want is oversight, and this gives them some a little bit of affirmation that there is some oversight. It's not exactly an investigation, but monitoring it says it's on their radar. And I think that is encouraging to hear.
Claire, what does it say that, about this particular incident that it continues to generate so much heat and so much attention?
I mean, it says that the reasons why thousands of Jacksonvilleans went into the streets after the death of George Floyd in 2020, those issues have not been rectified. People do not feel as though the things they were complaining about then, which is a nationwide issue and a local issue, they do not feel like there has been substantive change. I believe that's why there's so much interest in this. And one thing that really strikes me is that this arrest was on September 29th, and then October 23rd, the DOJ, which is notoriously slow to move, says, we're looking into this. I mean, that's barely 3 weeks. That says that they saw the footage that we all saw and said that, you know, this warrants a further look. And that is a very serious implication for JSO. Their statement, I think, was clumsily worded and made it sound as though everyone's accusing them of a broader inquiry, which actually begs the question of, well, is there a broader inquiry coming?
So on that point, we got a message from Tom on Facebook. He says the DOJ also needs to include Kim Cobb in their investigation of Lakean Woods. And you'll remember Kim Cobb is the woman who was also violently arrested after a traffic stop. That conclusion coming, again, from the injuries that she sustained and showed in her mugshot. How might that case tie in, Nicole?
Well, what the DOJ said is that they are looking for practice and pattern. So I think that they're going to come in and they're going to look for that. They're going to look to see if anybody else has been beaten in this way by JSO during, you know, any type of incident, any type of interaction with the public. So I think that's how it fits in. Is it's that pattern and it's that practice that they're going to be looking for.
And Jasmine, on one hand, you know, the body camera footage was quickly released by the sheriff. It does show Woods was fleeing. It does show him resisting. It does show him falling face forward onto the concrete, essentially. The visuals from this arrest and the subsequent mugshots, though, were really
jarring.
A flashpoint. Yeah, and very jarring.
Yeah. You know, it's something even, you know, at our station, we had to think about, you know, do we air this? Do we show this? You have children who are watching the news too as well. This is airing in the morning show, at night. It's just something, but it's also something that you don't want to hide because it's exactly what happened. So, you know, showing those visuals only shows exactly what happened at that very moment. And it's enough for you to phrase your own opinion. It's enough for the DOJ to, you know, investigate. It's enough for, you know, you to, you know, for the police department to be investigated. I mean, people have questions. They want to know exactly, was this excessive for an incident of a seatbelt overall?
Another JSO story that you reported on this week, Nicole, is the issue of Armor Health. They're the former medical provider at the Duval County Jail, declaring insolvency. So Armor is no longer working at our jail, due, I would say, in no small part to your reporting. But what can you tell us about that development?
Yeah, it's kind of very complicated. It took me about a week to break all of that down. But essentially in 2020, 2021, Armor, which has dozens and dozens of contracts at jails across the country, broke their company into multiple LLCs. And what experts told me is that that is a way to kind of get around liability. If you get sued, you're only suing that one LLC versus the entire company. So this comes down to a handful of these LLCs. They say that they cannot pay about $153 million worth of debt. So they are now essentially liquidating and selling those assets in order to pay off that debt. The main bidder right now is a company that is also controlled and owned by the person and the entity that owns Armor right now. So this is a story we're taking a close look at, and I'm sure we will do, you know, more reporting as we continue to learn what exactly this means. And Armor still does have contracts in Florida, including in St. John's.
How would that affect their debtors or people who perhaps are suing because of concerns that they had about the quality of health care?
That's a huge question right now, is how exactly is this going to affect these ongoing lawsuits? Because there's so many. Armor is involved in at least 80. So that is one of the questions we're trying to answer. We're working with experts and talking to people. And one of the attorneys that is suing Armour actually filed a 500-page objection to the sale. He actually sued Armour in 2012. And that case is still ongoing, in part because Armour was not able to pay their own attorneys. So they have gone through about 6 law firms in this one 10-year lawsuit. So that's a huge question that we don't have the answer to yet. Hopefully we will.
I was going to say, so where's the money going? We're giving communities across the country, we're giving them millions and millions of dollars, and they're being sued for all of these instances where they're alleged to have been negligent in care. So that's not going there to the providing the care, and now they can't pay lawsuits either or their lawyers.
Yeah, so there's two. There's a lawsuit locally that they have not paid yet. The attorney on that case has been notifying the judge, like, there needs to be a payment here. They haven't paid. In Milwaukee, in their contract, and I think in all of their contracts, it says if we are sued, we will handle that payment, not the county. They just got sued in a settlement for $1 million in Milwaukee, and they actually told the county there, we can't pay this, so now the county is paying it out of their insurance. So this also potentially has implications for every single county that has ever contracted with them.
And taxpayers as well. We've got a call. Todd on line 1 wants to express concerns for the African-American community when it comes to JSO. Todd, welcome to the program. What's your comment?
Good morning. My name is Wells Todd, and we'll take them down, Jacks. I think what people know on the panel there this morning, and I want to say good morning to everyone. When the needs of the community are not met, like jobs and housing and grocery stores, and we're dealing with degradation, you're going to have a force that will be in the community to control any type of resistance. And it's basically what we're seeing throughout the country when it comes to the police. The other thing I have is a question, and I don't know if you have discussed this or not, but I'd like for people to understand that TK Waters just came back from Israel not long ago, and I'd like the group there to discuss why he went there in the first place. Thank you.
Thanks, Wells Todd. That's news to me. I didn't know about the Israel visit. Is that something that you...
That's news to me as well.
I mean, Florida Republicans generally have been making quite the show of their support of Israel during the war with Palestine, Hamas specifically. And I would suppose, as TK Waters is a Republican, that is part of that. I mean, Governor DeSantis, during his first campaign, he went to Israel, and we do see a very concentrated effort among Republicans nationwide and in Florida to demonstrate their support for Israel. So I imagine that is what that visit was about.
Yeah, I know the sheriff was at the pro-Israel rally earlier this week. We have a comment from Mike on X. He says the Woods incident, the Lakean Woods incident, further demonstrates the need for a civil review board that Mayor Deegan should create, as she stated in her campaign. Are there discussions any closer to a civil review board? I know that the sheriff has pretty vehemently said that's not going to happen.
I know personally, even working in Tallahassee, working in Cleveland, they've created these civil boards. Does it work? They don't have the research on does it actually work? What's the difference between, you voicing your concern or sending that in to the police department versus having a board that's holding police accountable or holding the person accountable? Does it actually really work? I think it's the research behind it that would make more sense to look into that first before you just put that board out.
I think a lot of it probably depends on the makeup of the board too.
Yeah. And whether or not they have any power.
Exactly.
Right.
Because most of the time they don't have any power.
We're going to shift now to a topic that we actually discussed on the program earlier this week, redlining in Jacksonville. So the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, came to town a few weeks ago. He announced a $9 million settlement with Ameris Bank over accusations of redlining in Jacksonville, persistent and systemic. But then yesterday, the federal judge in the case rejected that settlement. So, Hetal, what was the judge's reasoning when she rejected this deal?
Well, the problem with the deal, according to the judge, is that it wasn't specific enough about how the bank actually violated the law. And if it isn't specific enough, then they can't enforce anything that's part of that settlement because they're not admitting any wrongdoing. They're not saying we came out and discriminated against these groups, which is the initial charge against them. So What she's saying is, if I ever have to enforce this, I need in writing exactly what you're admitting to. And so they're going back to the drawing board. It's interesting, though, because this was a case that was brought on by the DOJ. So you would think it would be buttoned up if the DOJ is the one that's putting the settlement together, that they would make sure there are no holes in this. So it's interesting that this judge has put this ruling out. But I do see where there is really nothing in the settlement that says, here's what we've admitted that we've done wrong.
I wonder if there's a little egg on the face of the the Attorney General for having that pushback from a federal judge in the Jacksonville district. Just want to remind everybody, we're talking to our media roundtable. We're here with 4 excellent reporters. We welcome your calls. Give us a shout at 549-2937. You can reach out on X at FCC On Air or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. What do you make of that? This was, I think, first reported by the Tributary, was it not?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
So you had noted in there that the judge said the deal wasn't enforceable because all it required was for Ameris to obey existing anti-discrimination laws. Explain why that absence of specificity is an issue. I will say just one more thing that she added. She said she wants to support the parties in their effort to resolve the case, but they would need to refile without that paragraph or explaining exactly how they're going to enforce that.
Right. I think it just comes down to how exactly do you force that when these laws are already in place and they're not admitting that they broke those laws in the first place. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the document says when it is resubmitted.
So the history of redlining is at least 100 years old in this town because our initial zoning maps in Jacksonville even predated redlining maps. They were built along racial segregation lines. We spoke this week with 2 city leaders who are deeply involved in the issue of redlining and its history, including current school board member Warren Jones, who grew up, he's a Jacksonville native and grew up in the Mixontown area. Let's hear a little bit about what he had to say about the history of redlining in Jacksonville.
Well, it certainly has a major impact, and you see it today in many of our minority neighborhoods where they're impacted by industry. You have homes built right next to a railroad track in some areas of Newtown. You have, in the Mixontown area, you had homes that were surrounded by a garbage incinerator. You had the dog pound, which is now called the Animal Care and Control Center. You had schools placed in those neighborhoods for black kids to go to. So the redlining has tremendous. And then what we also learn is there's a thing called reverse redlining, where they'll give you the loan, but they'll charge you a higher interest rate.
So that is kind of an interesting thing, Jasmine, the issue of reverse redlining. But obviously, what he's drawing a continuum, from the earliest days where, black and brown neighborhoods in Jacksonville were basically designated, industrial or kind of anything goes zones, and how that continues today, not just in, monetary ways, but even in health impacts.
Right. Even recently, I just was out covering a story and hearing a little girl describing the area that she lives in, wishing that she can live in a different place and hoping that it would be a better spot. This neighborhood specifically, it's really hard for, little black girls, little brown girls to grow up in a community where, you don't have the same opportunities. So with redlining being a thing, that just hinders education, that hinders jobs, that hinders a lot of things, and it holds back a community. If you think about it, just, you should just be building everywhere. Like, you should be allowed to live and build anywhere and everywhere. That's how you get your city up and running and looking like a mixed city and a well-rounded city, a city that people want to visit and come to and feel comfortable.
Claire, I'm curious about that because, this is a deal. The bank denies that they engaged in any kind of redlining. They said they just agreed to this settlement to avoid, costly legal issue. But certainly the specifics that the DOJ provided were interesting. They said that the bank has never had a location branch in a majority black or Hispanic census tract, even though they represent 20% of the market. And it closed its one downtown branch, which had been a top performer. It has 0 loans in the urban core. So they're saying they're not redlining. The DOJ says they were. Is there any surprise that that kind of practice is even being alleged in the modern day?
I mean, I felt like I had jumped into a time machine and gone back to 1970 when I was reading this story. Redlining has an insidious history, but I think many of us thought it was just that, history. But to see this happen is to say it's happening today. And I mean, I am a bit cynical. I'm a journalist. Aren't we all a little cynical? I would be very surprised to learn that this is an outlier, that this is the only instance of this occurring in Jacksonville. And, you know, you can just go to these areas and you can see where the streets, the sidewalks, if they exist, they're crumbling. The road construction is endless. There's that elementary school on the north side that they built on fill dirt that was from the old landfill that was burnt, and it had lead and other contaminants in it, so that they had to close it down because literally children were playing on a playground that was filled with contamination in a Black community. And I have been there, and you're walking up the street and you're looking across the street and there's just all these houses filled with families, and you're thinking, like, you're literally feet away from all of this contamination. And that is very common in Black neighborhoods in Jacksonville. You know, bad infrastructure, schools that have lower grades in terms of the school itself's grade, and all of this environmental contamination, and not enough economic opportunity. I mean, we see our economic incentives going out to the white neighborhoods still today, and you expect people to break the cycle of poverty.
We got a call actually when we were doing that segment from a woman who works in banking, or had worked in banking, former candidate for office also, saying that that was really endemic. It was something that she noted as an employee there and raised concerns about. It wasn't at Ameris Bank, it was at another bank. But she said she wasn't at all surprised to hear about this. What do you think about that feedback from somebody who's been in that business?
You know, I want to make a comparison just growing up in Jacksonville, right? We compare a lot of the immigrant stories. And a lot of immigrants, if you couldn't get a loan, you were borrowing money from family members and kind of doing things that way. That was the way the immigrant community came up if they couldn't get a loan. That doesn't exist right now in so many communities when you don't have any kind of generational wealth and you have communities. I went to Stanton. That area looks very similar to what it did when I went there, you know, over 30 years ago. I grew up on the north side. There's been a lot of development on the north side. I live in Arlington now. There's been a lot of development in Arlington, but there are some pockets that still you have generations of people that have lived there that will not be able to come out of poverty. And we have to look at the systems that we have in place and say, how do we as a community, it's to all of our benefit to improve our community. So that's definitely an issue that we need to look at. And I think a lot of times when people say, you know, I really want to do better for my family, if you can't go to the bank and get a loan, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. And Nicole, I mean, one thing about the issue is it's not just a question of whether you can get a loan to buy a house, it's whether someone can get a loan to buy your house. So if, you know, you are not able to purchase a house in a neighborhood that's been redlined, obviously that impacts the homeowners there and whether they're going to be able to, you know, create that generational wealth by selling their house.
Yeah, so I actually covered redlining pretty deeply when I was a reporter in Fort Worth, and found that the families like who couldn't leave the neighborhood essentially felt very stuck in these places where redlining occurred. And, you know, the city was going in and raising homes that were falling apart because people weren't able to keep them up for a variety of reasons. And so now you have these pockets of neighborhoods where there's no grocery stores, there's no clinics, there's people aren't moving in because there are no homes to move into because generations of families aren't leaving those homes. And a big part of this is it affects the entire health of that community. In Fort Worth, and I would be not surprised if it was the same here, people in those red line neighborhoods die on average 12 and a half years earlier than the national average. So it is history. You know, we think of redlining as being this thing that, you know, happened way back then, but it's still affecting people actively today.
Also this week, I want to shift to the sudden resignation of Terrie Brady. She's the president of the Duval Teachers Union. It's a role that she's served for over 20 years, but Hetal, her attorney, insists this is a retirement. Those inside the public school sphere say that they had no warning of this supposedly planned retirement.
It does come as a shock, her and the number two leaving after many years. And, she had a great reputation. I mean, she just received a Lifetime Achievement Award, so it was a little bit of a shock. We know that there was an FBI and IRS investigation that opened up, and we don't know what that's about, but we can assume that since the IRS is involved, that there is some kind of financial wrongdoing, possibly tax evasion, possibly embezzlement. Those are the types of crimes that the IRS would investigate. We know that there is some discrepancy in terms of the salary that she received, ranging from $100,000 to $300,000 at a time that, we're talking about teachers' pay. So there are a lot of issues there, but we don't know what the connections are. What we do know is that Hank Cox, a white-collar crime defense attorney, was at the scene when they raided these offices. And so that tells you something isn't right. And so there's a lot of suspicion of what may have happened, but we don't know at this time.
So this is not the first time that the union leadership has shaken up. Jasmine, earlier this month, we saw the resignation of the union vice president, Ruby George, also stepped down, although her retirement was planned. And this all comes at a time with there's increasing pressure on teachers and the teachers union. This year, the Florida legislature barred teachers unions from automatically deducting dues from members' paychecks. And that's expected to destabilize unions overall in the state. It's a state that's already not considered very friendly to labor. How do you think teachers are responding to all of this development and kind of uncertainty?
I think it's shocking to just see something, especially after her receiving these prestigious awards, to see something like that. That's disheartening to even see. But it's definitely something, again, that you have to think about when becoming a teacher, the investments. It's already a hard time to be a teacher. It's already hard, directing classes, and, you have double the classroom size inside of a one classroom. So the pressure is on, but it makes you think about, what happens behind closed doors. And exactly what's going to come out on top of this, since this was a planned retirement.
Definitely a difficult time to be a teacher, Claire.
It is. I mean, the governor is on a warpath against teachers, and so are many politicians. We have Moms for Liberty with its influence in the state of Florida, that far-right group that refers to teachers' unions as the K-12 cartel. And that is not hyperbole. That is what they call them. They look at them as the enemy because they protect teachers' jobs and they advocate for teachers. And this is just part and parcel of the war on labor and unions that has been ongoing for decades in the United States. I mean, to the detriment of workers. I saw this amazing graph not long ago that showed how income inequality increased at a proportion as union participation decreased. So we know that having unions protects workers, and it leads to higher salaries and better working conditions. And, not having them leads to greater income inequality, which feeds into resentment and anger.
If you'd like to join the conversation with our 4 reporters on these issues, give us a call at 549-2937. Reach us on X at FCC On Air, or comment on our Facebook or Instagram pages. Teacher morale, Nicole, I know from talking to people who are, friends of mine that are teachers or in educate or perhaps recently retired, we have seen a number of retirements increase, not just in union leadership, but in the rank and file of the school system.
Yeah, we have, and we see that everywhere. I have a lot of friends across this country who are teachers, or more appropriately, were teachers, and left around the pandemic because of the rhetoric surrounding teaching, and it just became too much too quickly, and they decided to leave. And the bad part is that these are all great people. Like, my friends were very good teachers, as I am sure most of these people that are leaving because of this are. So how is this affecting our education in the long run?
I know that it's not the only field, Hetal, where, the pandemic was a kind of crucible that was really hard to get through. And I think there was an expectation, whether you're a healthcare provider or a teacher, that, once the pandemic resolved, that things would kind of either return to normal or get a little easier than that difficult period. And in fact, it's almost the opposite.
Teachers are really struggling right now. They're are so few resources at the schools. There's so many teacher shortages. You have constantly positions posted. Classroom sizes are large. Teachers are overwhelmed. And a lot of the teachers are just now kind of feeling some of the effects that they face from the pandemic, because when you're in it, you're kind of in survival mode. And now you have a time to sit down and go, oh my gosh, I'm feeling the effects of that. And the students are. So it's just really a challenging time. I think, we have a very large teachers union here. We have a big school district. And so this is a huge deal. Teachers need the advocates. They need the people that are fighting for them on these issues. And, to her credit, she did get them a raise. She got teachers a raise. There have been some accomplishments that she's made, but at a very critical time for leadership in the teacher community, the last thing they need is any kind of scandal.
It's interesting, too, that you talk about leadership because, of course, the superintendent left. They recently tried to, fill that position. And Jasmine, they were unable to get even enough qualified people to even conduct a search.
Yeah, I mean, I remember covering this story when I first got here to Jacksonville, and I was, thinking, I think it was about 10 people that were just not qualified. So what do you do when you have 10 people who say that they're ready and they're not ready? Just yesterday, I was in a classroom where there were 3 different grades inside of one classroom. How does a teacher handle 3 different grades? You're focusing on 2 students at once and then 4 students in another, across the board. That's very stressful. Just like you said, coming back from the pandemic, we all were in survival mode for the most part. I think we're all feeling this after effect of exactly how you handle life now. Going to work, you go from being hybrid, being on a computer monitor, trying to keep these kids to stay focused. My sister's a teacher. The stories that I hear from her are incredible. She loves what she does. I cover Teacher of the Week. These teachers love these students, but if they don't have the support, they can't continue on.
How much does it matter, Claire, the leadership at the top being vacant? There's also, I think one of the reasons that they didn't get very strong responses to their search, where they usually get, 70 or 80 applicants. They had, fewer than 20 this time. And as you said, Jasmine, about half of those were not even qualified for the position. But you have elections coming up, school board elections, adding additional uncertainty to the future of any superintendent were they to hire one. How does that trickle down to teachers in the classroom?
Well, I mean, it's a ship without a captain, essentially. The entire school system is. They looked at the superintendent to decide the direction and how the school system responds to state mandates and all these different things. So, they're sort of aimless. I mean, I'm sure that they're doing their very best, and there are certainly many people who are working in administration there who are trying to fill that void. But absent that person to say, this is what we're doing, what does it fall to the school board? And then it also sort of feeds into this long time drumbeat to make the superintendent position an elected position, which would infuse politics into a role that many people do not necessarily support, but there is a sizable minority who would like to see superintendents, which other districts have, be elected.
It's obviously become a very political assignment as school board meetings and school board members have grown increasingly partisan and political. Duval County is now one of, several counties that ousted its superintendent, although Dr. Green will tell you she left of her own accord, but certainly under a lot of pressure. And so Duval County is not just looking for a superintendent, Nicole. They're competing with all of these other places that are looking in equally uncertain environments to get a superintendent.
Right. Yeah. Like Duval County, like with many of the topics we've talked about today, is not alone. This is something that is happening across the country. So, not only are we trying to find the best of the best, but so is everybody else. And, to the earlier point, these teachers need leadership, and leadership is so important because that is the difference between I really love my job and I love going to it, and I really love my job, but it's directionless and I don't feel really great, so I'm going to leave.
Not to mention pay.
Yes.
I mean, mention pay.
It's you're doing 3 jobs and with half the pay, and they're cutting it for some school districts. That's heavy.
I mean, literally 3 jobs in the classroom that you were just in with 3 different grades. And yeah, you're not getting paid more. And you got to wonder if you feel very valued in those moments.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned politics, and going back to Terrie Brady, this is a non-political position, but let's not forget that she was also part of the Democratic Party before she took this position. And now you have an environment in the state that is very anti-union. So there is always an underlying issue of politics in everything that's involved in education, and that should not be the case. We should all want better education for our kids. We should all support better pay for our teachers, improving schools. These are things that should be bipartisan, and that's why teachers need advocates like the union to do that job so that they can do their daily job. They can't be fighting that battle and be dealing with everything they're dealing with at school.
It's certainly a very political time throughout Florida for anybody in education. I want to move briefly to a class action lawsuit involving a local entrepreneur. Janae White has been very popular on TikTok and social media, has, made a fortune for herself as sort of an Airbnb investor, now being sued with investors citing bad business practices and claiming fraud. So we should say that White is connected to 8 companies, according to our news partner, News4Jax. How much attention is this generating? She had already generated a lot of buzz on social media, Jasmine.
Yeah, working in Tallahassee, I saw attorney Ben Crump, who posted her, praising her for her 8 businesses that she has. It's, I can't even speak on behalf of, exactly what's happening in this case, but it's definitely something that you keep your eye on.
I mean, the fact that how many thousand people joined that Facebook group so quickly who were clamoring against her, that really raised my eyebrows, honestly.
Yeah, and certainly somebody that had been getting a lot of praise for almost, this great example of somebody turning their life around and being able to, compete and create an empire, really.
And I think it speaks to where we are as a society right now, where people want someone and something to believe in. And when you have that type of charisma and the kind of trust that she built with people, that, she was going to their family birthday parties. She made the relationships personal. And so when you're investing $10,000 with this person, it's not just that you're investing your money. You are putting your faith, your belief, and hoping for something better. And I think that's why it's hard when you see cases like this, because you're literally crushing people's faith in having something better. The people that trusted her, they put their money not just into her business, but into her and her brand because they trusted her.
And it sounded like she was very charismatic, like you said, really creating instant relationships with people who, had a ton of faith in her, not just as a investment partner, but as a friend.
Yes.
And so what does it say generally, Nicole, about, is there any cautionary tale just in terms of when you have social media stars or investments that are, breaking on that level on social media, how should people approach that?
That's a great question, because I would assume that these people approached it the way that I probably would have of, you're building that friendship, you're building that rapport, and you build that trust, and then the rug just gets pulled out from underneath you. So I'm sure they're also wondering, where did I go wrong? What are the red flags that I didn't see? And that makes it really, really hard to trust anybody. And I'm constantly asking myself, like, who can I trust? Especially, in the roles that we
You can
are.
trust Anne.
Yeah, I can trust Anne. That's about it. So I think that just furthers erode our trust as people in a society. And I was wondering is there any type of criminal investigation that's ongoing, or is this just a class action lawsuit?
So far, that is all I've seen, but I would guess, she has over 50,000 Instagram followers, a huge base of people that loved her and supported her. And I'm guessing that just that alone would generate some level of interest from, investigators looking at any possible criminal wrongdoing. Does it in any way discourage faith in kind of an entrepreneurial vision like that when you have somebody that's kind of out there so much and prominent, and yet now under this cloud?
It can be, but you look at on a bigger scale a Bernie Madoff, right? It was the same type of thing. He built relationships and built trust with people, and people trusted their money with him because they trusted him. They believed him. And so, we always say in the news, if it's too good to be true,
It is.
be skeptical. But you're at a time where a lot of people are struggling financially, and they're looking for ways to invest their money that are going to be beneficial to them. And when you have somebody that is the living proof of success in your mind, you want to be part of it. It's why there's such a movement for so many things, self-help in our community right now.
Well, it is now time for finally our lightning round. I'm going to start with you, Hetal. What have you got for us today?
Oh, I'm really looking forward to Porch Fest tomorrow. Shout out to my girl, Karen Fagans. Happy birthday, Karen. Looking forward to celebrating you and going to Fall Festival at my kids' school, J. Allen Axon, today.
Excellent. Nicole, what do you got cooking?
Don't forget to set your clocks back on Sunday. And
thank you.
Yeah, and it's the beginning of the month. So if you have pets, give them their heartworm medication.
Oh, that's great. I needed both of those so much.
Well, you're welcome.
Claire, go forth. What is on your agenda?
Well, I know we'll all be watching with great interest to see what the appellate court says about the redistricting case in Jacksonville involving the minority access district that was eliminated. The court is supposed to rule later this month on whether or not that was legal.
All right.
And
Jasmine.
I was going to say after that, we can head out to the fair. That's right across the street. That's what I'm really excited about. I'm new to Jacksonville, so I'm looking to have some fun.
That's right. And it may be one of the last years that the fair is at its current location. It might be
right.
moving elsewhere. So it might be your last chance to get a funnel cake downtown, Jasmine. Well, I just like to say it's my last day of my first week on air here.
Congratulations, Ann.
Made it so far. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'd like to thank Jasmine Monroe of First Coast News, Claire Goforth of the Daily Dot, former
Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Serious injury cases are complex, and civil trial attorneys present the evidence juries need to see and hear. More at waynehogan.law.
Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com.
President Biden calls for a humanitarian pause as Israel's strikes on Gaza intensify. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he won't give in.
Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism. That will not happen.
In New York, the Trump family have their day in court, and tributes pour in for an actor who changed the way we talk. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Rugby is currently one of the fastest growing sports around the globe, not just for male competitors, but for female athletes as well. Here on the First Coast, the Duval Tides girls high school rugby team is about to kick off its 2023 fall season. Joining me now are Duval Tides coach, Melissa Butler. Welcome.
Thank you.
Duval Tides player, Cora Hoy. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Cora, your mother here as well, Brenda Hoy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So if there's one thing everybody knows about rugby, it's rough and tumble. It's been said, possibly by Winston Churchill, that while soccer is the gentleman's game played by thugs, that rugby is the thugs' game played by gentlemen. Of course, this league has 0 gentlemen in it. But talk to me about the game, Melissa. This is a game that you're passionate about, you coach. Talk about how it interplays with its reputation.
Yes. So that saying is very true. However, we teach people how to tackle safely. I know tackling is might scare some people away. However, it is very safe. We teach players from the ground up, and the sport has been around for a very long time. It has actually, the men's team has been here for 50 years. So there's a great history of rugby in Jacksonville. The women's team has been around for about 16 years now. And then we're just excited to bring it to girls in the area also.
So, Cora, tell us, what is the appeal of this sport and how long have you been at it?
I've been playing rugby this is my 9th year this year. And the
Wow.
appeal,
And how old are you?
I'm 17.
Wow. So almost half your life.
Yes. And the appeal, I think, for me personally, it's the sisterhood. It's the family that I find within rugby. You can go anywhere in the world and you can find someone that plays rugby and you have a new friend. And I think that is something special and unique that you don't find in other sports.
And are you finding that people your age, women your age, are increasingly interested in rugby?
Yes.
Yeah, friends of yours and
Yes.
yeah. And so, Mom, Brenda Hoy, tell us about having a daughter who's excelling at rugby and how she first got into it. Was it something that you also were interested in?
Actually, the great thing about it is that we are new transplants to the Jacksonville area. So where we came from, rugby was already implemented both at a younger age, starting at U11 and up.
Where
So
was that?
We were in Fallbrook, California.
Okay.
So you have this great opportunity of playing rugby. So and for us, it was like a no-brainer. It's a sport that creates, like Cora said, this community, this opportunity where it doesn't matter what your shape of your body is. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. It's an opportunity to grow, to become better athletes, to just, I don't know, again, that community. It's definitely something that is growing. So to have a player that's excelling, she also received a scholarship to play at Life University. So she's played with the U.S. 16 or U18 Women's USA Rugby program. So we're really fortunate. It's definitely a great place to put us.
That's awesome. And so, Melissa, can you give us a little synopsis of how rugby is played? What sort of sports is it similar to?
I mean, we try to say it's a combination of soccer and football, but not really either one of them. The hardest thing for people to understand is that we throw the ball backwards, and the only time that it can go forward is if it's kicked forward. So the goal is to catch the ball kind of running at full speed, to break the line, and then from there, it's always a replay. Once someone gets tackled, then we go into what's called a ruck, where your teammates come and protect you, and we recycle the ball. The scrum half, who Cora will probably be playing our scrum half this year, that'll be her job. It's very close to the quarterback in football, where they're directing the team. And then kind of like Brenda said, it's great for all sizes. Having someone athletic, that can take the ball on and has confidence and is willing to run into someone else is great. But then someone that maybe is a little shyer and needs some time and is quicker, we like to put them on the outside and they have an opportunity to run and show off also.
And not everybody can see it because not everybody's watching, but you brought a ball. It looks larger. It looks like somewhere between a basketball and a football, size-wise.
Yeah.
And kind of that shape.
Yeah, so it's a little more oblong. We don't have the stitching, the big ones like football does, a rugby ball did in the history in the past. But it's great. It's easy to catch because it is a little bigger than a football, and so it makes it easier for women to pick up.
So I'm going to say this as a mom with 2 soccer-playing sons, and I don't mind asking or even scolding you a little bit, but shouldn't you be wearing helmets?
So we do have what's called a scrum cap if someone really wants, and it is a thin helmet. It does help with concussions, but we do teach everyone how to safely tackle. We don't go straight in with our head like you do see in football sometimes, and I know football has gotten a lot better and away from that and has gone to safer tackles. So we teach you how to tackle safely. We build it from the ground up. When you tackle, the goal is to tackle low, is to wrap someone's knees and to go to ground and to safely take them to ground. So no one's being thrown down, no one's being wrapped around the neck or anything like that. We work very hard to teach safe tackles, and in studies, rugby is not doesn't have any more injuries or concussions than any other soccer, football, lacrosse, any other sport out there.
And you're not heading the ball, I guess.
No.
Right. And so, Brenda, is that anything you have a concern about? I know just as a mom watching from the sidelines, it can be a little harrowing when you see somebody get injured or, your own child.
You'd actually be really surprised. There's less accidents or injuries on the pitch compared to other sports. Soccer, football, lacrosse, field hockey, those all rank above where rugby is. That's the ironic part of it.
Mm-hmm. And Cora, what is fun about it? What is it that you like when you're playing? What really inspires you?
Well, my team inspires me. My sisters around me inspire me. But also just the feeling.
Act is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.